A lot of these trade agreements are a copy of the old European agreements and constantly being updated. So the two latest ones, the European Union one, the Turkey one, they have the latest rules of origin in there. Some of the other trade agreements, you do need to be checking with the origin reference documents or the trade agreement itself to find out the rules of origin. Rules of origin are just a criteria by which you are classifying your product as UK preferential origin. And those rules will change depending on the product, depending on where they're going to, and you need to, and also the tariff code, and you need to be able to be in a position to prove that your products meet that specific rule of origin. The difference between that and a certificate of origin is basically that a certificate of origin is a non-preferential origin and doesn't have specific rules of origin per tariff code. So that's one of the differences. The benefit, quite simple really. It reduces what's known as the most favoured nation rate of import duty. Different countries will rate different products on their import duty. So if we've got a product with no import duty on it, some countries will have a certain percentage of import duty. Import duty is a cost of sale, unlike VAT, which you can claim back, you can suspend, you can defer duty, but if it goes into free circulation, then duty, if applicable to a product, is a cost of sale. If you can get rid of that, makes your products cheaper. And in international trade, for those of you who've been dealing in international trade, which I'm assuming you all are, will realise price is a big driver to developing trade. So the cheaper you can make your products by complying with the rules of origin, the less chance you have it's going to impact on your profits, and you can maintain profits and develop business overseas. Next slide, please. Okay, now then, if you could just scroll down to the bottom with that, Pauline, thank you. One of the things that, perfect, thank you. One of the things that you should always be doing in a practical sense. So, you know, the whole point of this is to say this is really what you should be looking at doing. Whether you do, it's entirely up to you, but these are recommendations. At the end of the day, who do we have trade agreements with? So the team, the export team, the sales team should be completely aware of who you have sales, or who the UK has sales agreements with, trade agreements with. Basically because those markets offer you the ability to reduce any import duty, all right? But what is the import duty? Now, one of the reasons why I mention this is because obviously we are looking at a procedure that's going to reduce your import duty to the customer. So we're going to go through all sorts of compliance, all sorts of bills of material to do this. But what if the import duty is already zero? So always make sure you check, because you don't want to go and do unnecessary work if you know you're going to get no benefit from it. Then there's the this is called being rather larger organizations have mentioned this one. Is it beneficial? Now, when we left the EU and we took on the UK global, the UK tariff, and the European Union stayed with the common external tariff, we reduced a lot of very low tariffs, so generally below 2% down to zero. In the EU, they still have usually around chapter 84, 85 of the tariff, so you know, engineering products, they still have import duties of 1.7%. Is it worth you going through the compliance to save 1.7%? Or is it just going to be more beneficial to offer the 1.7% discount? So again, have a think about it. Think about how these things work, because the compliance is quite extensive. Is the tariff code correct? Your tariff code for your product is going to determine what the rule of origin is. So, if there is a difference of opinion on tariff code, that could change the rule. And that could then either throw the compliance out, because if you're not complying with the correct rule and the product classification, that could cause issues. So make sure your tariff code is correct. And then where do I find the rules? Okay, there's two ways you can find the rules. Number one, you can go onto the UK tariff, and when you go onto the UK tariff and you select your tariff code, and you will scroll down the page and you will come to a section where you'll have 4 tabs. You'll have an import tab, an export tab, you'll have a rules of origin tab, and you will have a notes tab. So on the rules of origin, there is a drop-down menu above that where you would select the country. And once you select the country, it will then show you whether or not there is a rule of origin for that product. It's quite a good tool, that, because it will also show you where there isn't a rule. So if you think we've got a trade agreement with a certain country, because it's quite surprising how many people think we've got a trade agreement with the US, which we haven't, it will show you that. So you can see that. And that shows you the basics. If you want the full details, you need to go and look for the origin reference documents. So you type into search, whatever search engine you're using, put origin reference documents in, and then you will find the preferential rates and the actual origin reference documents, which is the rules of origin for each specific trade agreement we have. Within that, it will also tell you what proof do we need. Because if we meet the rule of origin, we've then got to indicate to customs that we meet that rule. And there are specific requirements as to what we would need to provide. Do we do a statement on the commercial invoice? Do we need a UK EUR1? If we're an approved exporter, do we need to use our approved exporter number? So we need to make sure we're compliant with that as well. Okay. Next slide, please, Paulie. So there's just a selection of some of the countries we have trade agreements with. Not all countries. There are quite a lot more. But these are the larger countries where we have trade agreements. Some of the trade agreements are in groups. So Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru are part of the Andean trade agreement that we have, whereas individual groups, trade agreements such as Japan and Canada, Iceland, and Norway is joined up. They will have their own origin reference documents to refer to. And at the moment, there is ongoing negotiation with Australia and New Zealand to try and finalise that trade agreement and, enable us to get preferential trade into those countries. Next slide. So, rules of origin. Next one, please, Pauline. So, what determines the rules of origin? Okay, the tariff code, the product type, and the individual trade agreement. So we need to have access to those to make sure we are compliant. Obviously, as I've mentioned before, you need to make sure your tariff code is correct. In terms of the trade agreement, this will go to the HS level, so it will go, in terms of the European EU trade agreement, it will go to the harmonized system level 6 digits, and then you'll have 4-digit codes, and then you'll have two-digit requirements where the goods have to be, or the components have to be substantially transformed. The definition from the World Trade Organization, this is where the guidelines come from. They state, that's the statement from the World Trade Organization, that the basis of the rules of origin are required to prove there has been a certain amount of processing or work done on non-originating materials. And all these different rules and guidelines are there so that when you actually produce a product, you can say, I've done this amount of production, this amount of processing on my products, therefore it is UK origin. That would then qualify for compliance with the rules of origin. You send it to the country where we have the trade agreement with. You provide the required proof of origin, and then at the import stage, your customer pays less import duty. If you simply bring a product into the UK and just distribute it from that point on, it is not going to comply with the rules of origin because you haven't done anything to that procedure, that product. And also you need to be very clear about the definition of a procedure and a simple procedure. Yeah, a procedure is an assembly, a construction, a process that a product goes through from component stage to actually final manufacturing stage, including testing and quality and all that sort of thing. If you simply are clipping two things together, you're simply putting a logo on a t-shirt, then the rules of origin will dictate whether or not that is a sufficient enough process to qualify the goods of being substantially processed within the UK, and obviously then to be able to be classified as UK origin. So what different countries do is they accumulate these rules and regulations, and they add them together based on the World Trade Organization guidelines. So sufficient transformation is something that's very prevalent in these trade agreements. So you will see that in a lot of them. You will also see others like ad valorem percentages, where a certain percentage of non-originated materials will be allowed within a product, and also certain criteria for operational processes. Now that usually applies to textile products and things like this. So these guidelines have been taken on, and then the two countries will negotiate that and work out what rules within this bilateral trade agreement they want to apply to each individual product. And that's basically how, in a simplified version, how it works. Next slide, please. So the criterion is wholly obtained. Wholly obtained products are basically what you see there on screen. Minerals, plants and vegetables, live animals, products, etc., etc. Now, I know you usually gets asked this question, so I'll answer it just in case anybody actually asks it. People say, well, what if you import the seeds from the USA? Those sort of thing. It doesn't matter where the bulbs, the seeds in terms of plants come from, it's where the thing has grown. Same with an animal being reared in the UK. Okay, so it's basically where the growing process actually occurs. Wholly obtained products, you could also manufacture goods and claim they're wholly obtained. But if you get components from a UK supplier and the UK supplier says, oh, by the way, they're UK origin, you are going to have to go and get a supplier's declaration, because in the real world, as you all probably know, companies are not that aware sometimes of what the impact of origin has. So it's massively important when it's wholly obtained that everything is UK origin. So again, you may need a supplier's declaration to actually prove that from a supplier in the UK. Next one, please. Now, in the trade agreements, you will see terminologies and acronyms. Okay, now these are important to understand because you will see them a lot, but they do differ between the different rules of origin in the different trade agreements. This is the latest. This is taken from the EU-UK trade agreement. And what you're looking at there is a section. So on the left-hand side, you're looking at the tariff code. So you're looking at what's known as the tariff heading. The tariff heading is the first 4 digits. The first 2 digits are the chapter, and the 6th digit is, in terms of the trade agreement tariff subheading, but it's also the HS code. So what does that mean in terms of if I have a product that starts 1515? What that means is if I'm manufacturing, making that product, and I have non-originating materials in my product, then they can't have the same tariff subheading or HS level as the final product. So if you look at the next one, 1517, if my product that I manufacture is then classified with the first 4 digits as 1517, because of the rules of origin changing tariff heading, any non-originating materials cannot be or cannot start 1517. So they have to have a different tariff heading. And this is the difference in substantial transformation or sufficient transformation. The other one you will see is just CC. And where you see CC, it doesn't crop up a lot. It means you have to have a different chapter heading. So that's quite a substantial transformation when the non-originating components have to have a different chapter, which is the first 2 digits of the tariff, than the final product. So, and this does change between trade agreements. So sometimes you will see this, and sometimes you will actually see it written, changing tariff heading, changing chapter as well. So it just depends on the trade agreement and the rules of origin you are actually reading. Next one, please. So that's just to explain what I've just been through there, and you will see that in the European trade agreement, you will see that in the Turkey trade agreement, but you won't see it yet in the Egyptian trade agreement. And I believe they have recently updated the Norway and Iceland trade agreement to incorporate this these acronyms. Next one, please. What you will also see now is the one that probably people refer to the most, and this is the percentage, the allowance for non-originating materials in my final product. And sometimes what you will get is a combination of 2 rules, as you can see here. So if we're looking at 8473, for example, as our final product, if my non-originating components started 8473, so I imported non-originating components with the first 4 digits of the tariff code 8473, and by the time I'd manufactured my product it was 8473, then I couldn't use the change in tariff heading. But then it does say, or a maximum non-originating material content of 50% of the X works price. So if it was less than 50%, I could. All right, now, in some rules, you will get an and. So you need to clearly and read the rules clearly. Some of the older trade agreements that we have taken from the European days do still say change in tariff heading and this. So you will have 2 rules. In the European trade agreement, there is 1 rule. Okay, so that's what max NOM is. It's this percentage allowance for non-originating materials in your product that you are claiming to be UK origin. But those products do have to be processed. Next slide, please. When you get into the textiles, if any of you are doing textiles, you will probably think, well, why do they make it so difficult for textiles? Because textiles, there are different rules, and it's all to do with certain procedures. So in terms of 6215, weaving combined with making up, including cutting of fabric. So this is what you're having to do to non-originating material, making up including cutting of fabric preceded by printing. Now making up, as if you're in the textile trade, you will know That's the third or fourth stage. So this is what you have to do, and you have to be able to prove you do, either or in this case, to a textile product. And it does make it difficult in certain instances, because you do need to know what the procedure is, and you do need to know what the content is. And the additional requirements in the textiles is the requirements for identifying the type of fabric, yarn, whatever you're using. So all this information is in the rules of origin. You just need to identify it. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, just on this section, we have what is known as cumulation. So we've had wholly obtained, we've had substantial transformation on non-originating materials, we've had a maximum non-originating material allowance. But within the trade agreements, we also have cumulation. And cumulation is where components from the country we have a trade agreement with. So let's take the European example. If we use European components in the production of our product in the UK, and we do a substantial process on those products from the EU, they can then be classed as if they were manufactured in the UK. So they can be classed as UK origin. Okay, now the beauty of that is it doesn't impact on your max nom. It doesn't impact on your max nom if you've got a max nom percentage requirement. But it does mean that you have to make sure that those European components, in terms of the EU trade agreement, do go through more than the insufficient processes that are identified in the trade agreement. So just as an example, insufficient processing is classed as fixing bottles, fixing on cards or boards, simple packing operations. Simple means where there's not any automation, where it's a very simple procedure. Affixing, printing marks, labels, logos. So if you do bring apparel in and you do put logos on it, that is classed as insufficient. So that would not, those components would not be able to be accumulated. And one other thing about the trade agreement, and this is where quite a lot of companies have actually fell down, if you import European components into free circulation in the UK and resell them back to Europe, they will have duty applied to them. You cannot use the trade agreement. The only way you can get around that is if you want to import European components and redistribute them, you need to use a custom special procedure to do that. You cannot put them into free circulation. Okay. Different trade agreements have different accumulation countries. So some of you will have seen from the chamber, you can get an EUR1, you can get an EUR Med. And again, that's the proof of origin depending on the trade agreement. An EUR Med is when you accumulate between two different countries. So again, the origin reference document will show you the countries that can be accumulated. In other words, where the components come from. You do more than the insufficient processing, they're classed as the UK. But again, you need to read the origin reference documents to do that. At the moment, you can't see that through the UK tariff, although there are links there that will take you to different areas. Okay. Next one, please, Pauline. So let's see how they work. If we go down to the bottom, I think there's another one in there. Thanks. Great. So we need to, first of all, as you saw in one of the rules there, X works price. What's the X works price in terms of the rules of origin? Well, in terms of rules of origin, it will be a transactional price, your sales price. It doesn't mean you have to ship products under X works Incoterm. It just means that you are calculating the sales price of your product, and within that sales price, you are incorporating any non-originating components, any accumulated components, any UK wholly obtained components, and other things as well, such as processing costs, administration costs. You can even include profit to get to this X works value. So if anybody, one of the things I mentioned before is approved exporter. And approved exporter status is a requirement. Well, if you're an approved exporter, it allows you to use a statement of origin as proof of origin on your documentations, irrespective of value in a lot of the trade agreements. But it is a requirement to South Korea for shipments over 6,000 euros. So again, if you ever wanted to go and apply for that, it is what's known as a C1454 form, but you have to prove how your product meets the specific rule of origin for the country you want to trade with before you get this approved exporter status from HMRC. It saves you time. It's you know, and obviously with South Korea, it's a requirement there. In terms of the value of the non-originator materials, what you have to include is the cost of getting them to the UK. So if you purchase non-originating materials from China and you paid $100 for them and it cost $100 to get the goods here, then the value of non-originating materials is $200. It's not $100 of what you bought it for in China. So again, that will form part of your calculation. Okay, and then, you know, the easiest way to do it really, or the simplest way is, you know, if you've got a bill of materials, put it on an Excel spreadsheet and work it out, and just, you know, put all the lines on there where it comes from, and then, you know, you can start working and looking at whether or not you do meet the specific rule of origin when you can access the rule of origin. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a quick example on the bill of materials. Another two lines should come up, Pauline.
It's coming. Here you go.
Another one, okay. So this is a very, very simple diagram. Okay. So if you imported non-originating material, and the tariff code was 8473, so it's very important when you are, if you are importing products, to always make sure that you do the supplier does put the right tariff code on there, because even if you're into importing components, you might not be selling to somewhere where we've got a trade agreement, so it's not relevant. But there again, if those components are going into the same products that do go to somewhere, then you need to be able to make sure you've got this traceability, because it's very important, as that will be part of the classification of whether you comply with the rule of origin. So we bring the product in non-originating, and it starts at 8473, and the price of those components per item is £80, and that's the cost of getting it from China to the UK. The cost of the UK components in our products is £60, and the cost of the EU components, which we accumulate, is £40. But because we do more than the insufficient processes, which is listed in the trade agreement, then they can be classed as being produced and have UK origin. So that cost gets added to the £60, giving us £100 UK origin components because of the processing. The production costs, including just realised that sum doesn't actually work out, but the production costs of £100, we get it added together, it should come out at £280, but it's actually coming out at 260 for some reason. But that's how we work out we do the bill of materials, we put it together, and we put everything together. Next slide, please. So what we need to do now is find the rule of origin. And obviously we've seen the rule of origin from the trade agreement. This is from the European trade agreement. And we can see that we've got a change in tariff heading, or we've got a maximum non-originating materials. So we know we don't change the tariff heading, so we use the maximum non-originating material. To do that, we use a simple calculation, percentage calculation, which is the value of the non-originating materials over the X works value. So in this case, it's 80 over 260 and gives us 30.7% non-originating material value. When we look at the trade agreement, we know we meet the rule of origin. And that's basically very, very simple example of what you have to do. I'm sure there's lots of you there with products with loads and loads of different components in them. So, but that's basically what you do. And just remember, if you meet the rules of origin for the EU-UK trade agreement, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll meet them for other trade agreements. So you do need to check the differences. Next slide, please. So, as I said before, then we have to provide proof. We have to provide proof to customs that our products meet the rules of origin, and then that does depend on the trade agreement. In terms of the UK-EU trade agreement, that is purely a statement of origin. So it's a statement that you put on the bottom of your invoices. For other trade agreements, such as the Egyptian one, if it's over 6,000 euros, you need a document. Okay, so you need to provide a document which you would get from your chambers of commerce. Next slide, please. So the statement that you would use is that the export of the product covered by this document. In terms of the UK, if you're putting that on your commercial invoice, then it's your EORI number. And then you would put, and then there's usually a gap where it says UK preferential origin. So you put UK preferential origin, place a date, and you sign it. Okay, now what you need to be very, very, very careful of is when you're issuing your commercial invoice, you can actually put this statement on a packing list. Everybody that I know puts it on the commercial invoice, and the reason is because of the statement except where otherwise clearly indicated. Because you might have a shipment going out to the EU somewhere, and you might have products from the USA on there that are US origin. All you're doing is just forwarding those products on as part of your shipment. That statement only applies to products that have UK preferential origin, so customs need to know which ones to apply the preference to. So you need to clearly indicate on the commercial invoice the origin of the goods so that the correct procedures and obviously preferential treatment is applied. By not doing that, if there's no origin on there, and if you just say all the products are UK origin, then if there is a product that doesn't meet the rules of origin, then that's non-compliance with customs. And if you get checked and found out, then that's not really very good for you. Okay, next one, please. I believe this is the final one of this short session, and we've still got just over 15 minutes left, so plenty of time for Q&A if you like. Origin reference documents, what are these? Well, you will get two reference documents per agreement. So in terms of the European Union, for example, if you go onto the .gov website and put reference documents for the customs tariff, that's directly off the website. You can download these documents as Word documents if you want to. And what they will do, the first one will show you what the preferential tariff will go down to for the whole tariff. So in terms of the European Union, every chapter, which is the first two digits of the tariff, every chapter goes down to 0. In terms of some of the other trade agreements, it doesn't. So Norway and Iceland doesn't go down to 0. Egypt doesn't go down. The Andean one doesn't go down to 0. Turkey does, I think, because it's a new agreement. But you can check, simple as that. Then you've got the actual rules of origin or the origin reference. That will take you through, in order, it will take you through what is wholly obtained. It will show you all the insufficient procedures. So if you are accumulating, it will show you the countries where you can accumulate from. So that's important. If you are importing products, then obviously that's important if you want to use that. And then it will show you what proof of origin is required. So EUR1, UK EUR1, EUR Med, statement of origin, approved exporter, what your requirements on there. It will show you the text for suppliers declaration and long-term suppliers declaration. So you can see, which country's in. And also from the textile perspective, it will show you all the details of the different types of requirements and procedures for textiles. So you can look at that, you can look at the country you're going to, and if you can reference across that, you'll get all the details you need to ensure that you can comply. But at the end of the day, always remember that it is a lot of work. It is confusing. The way the reference documents and the trade agreements have been written are not always easy to interpret, but you are saving your customer money. And so you are making your products more competitive by complying. But always check what the import duty is. Always check, is it beneficial? Okay. And then you go through that process of whether or not you can actually meet the specific rule of origin for your products. Next one, and that's it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that quick, blistering run through. Quite a lot of information to get through there. But if anybody's got any questions, please fire away.
Thank you, Jeff. So for everyone, if you've got any question, there's a chat box or a Q&A, and I believe you can raise your hand and I can allow you to speak as per Zoom requirements. So just feel free to just write it down and we'll pick it up with Jeff. In the meantime, Jeff, can I ask a question? Has there been any changes in the way we can use long-term supplier declaration since Brexit? So I've read yesterday was an article about how we can't use LTSDs with the EU anymore. Is that correct? Or
to be honest, I've not read that or come across that. The LTSDs are still part of the origin reference documents, so they're still showing as being applicable to the trade agreement. So if they're still being shown as being applicable to the trade agreement, I would imagine that you can probably use them. It might be, or you can use them. I mean, once they get to the stage where they do pull the long-term suppliers declarations, then they would need to update the origin reference documents, which we all work off to make sure we comply. So at this moment in time, the long-term suppliers declarations are still part of the origin reference and the trade agreements and rules of origin.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone's got any question? Anyone's got anything they want to go through? Any specific issues you've been having so far? If not, then we'll just finish off. So you've still got time to put your question before I finish, but if not, thank you everyone for joining. As Jeff said, this is a very quick run through rules of origin. We do have a training course that takes 3 hours, so we go a lot more into it, and we go into more depth on each rule and how they work, and obviously time for questions as well. So we'll send the details of the course over, and yeah, well, if there's no question, then thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll see you again at our next BISA session in a couple of weeks. And if you've got any questions, you've got all the details here on how to reach us on email or by phone. So thanks everyone, and thank you so much, Jeff. That was very informative, and I'm sure very helpful for everyone. Oh, we got a Q&A. Thank you, Jeff. Perfect. Thank you, Michael, and we'll see you all very soon.
Bye.